Hello everyone, my name is Brandon Boyd, and today I will be presenting the journal article entitled Does Use of Emotion Increase Donations and Volunteers for Nonprofits? Written by Pamela Paxton, Christopher Velasco, and Robert W. Ressler. Before we dive into the research, let's set up an introduction about nonprofits and why donations and volunteers are so important for them to succeed. To start, let's talk about emotive language. Emotive language can persuade, inspire, and ultimately lead directly to action. Affective neuroscience and dual process theory emphasizes that emotion structures cognition in an automatic, even preconscious process. In simpler terms, when we are exposed to emotion, in this case emotive language, it affects our understanding of a situation and makes us feel a certain type of way, potentially without us even recognizing it. The concept of connecting with emotions isn't new. In fact, it dates all the way back to the days of Aristotle, who listed emotion, or pathos, as one of three fundamental modes of rhetorical persuasion that can induce an audience to make a desired judgment or action. Emotion is especially relevant for nonprofits, who are in a sector rife with emotion-laden issues. Emotional appeals from nonprofits are all around you. You may see puppy dog eyes on your TV screen as part of a commercial, or hear bell ringers collecting change outside of stores as you shop, just for example. Connections with your emotions from nonprofits aim to lead potential donors and volunteers to experience an unconscious, effective response that spurs a more deliberate decision to engage with the nonprofit. Previous studies and other literature help to inform the researchers in their quest for new knowledge. Here we can talk about some of the more important items. Previous research on nonprofits has taken a cold, financial-focused approach. Much of what has been research related to nonprofits focus on costs, the price of donations, and other financial characteristics that stress an economic approach through a donor demand model. Previous research on emotion has backed the thoughts of those like Aristotle through psychology and affective neuroscience, which has shown the importance of emotions to guide decisions. With that information, we can now explore the author's hypotheses and thoughts before doing research. The authors of the journal article hypothesized that nonprofits whose mission statements contain more emotional messages will induce emotion in individuals, yielding a higher number of volunteers and more donations. They believe this would vary based on the type of emotion expressed and the institutional field in which the nonprofit is located. As an example, the authors cited fields with social bonding and interaction as a focus, like recreational clubs and arts organizations, to be especially successful with positive emotions, whereas nonprofits with social problems or challenges, like environmental and poverty organizations, may be more successful with negative emotions. Next, we'll examine just how the authors did their research. Available administrative IRS 990 e-filter data was used to analyze 90,000 nonprofit mission statements from 2012 to 2016. The IRS 990 form is an annual return required by the IRS for most nonprofit organizations and provides data on nonprofits that includes expenditures, finances, governance, mission, compliance with federal requirements, and numbers of staff and volunteers. Donations were measured by aggregative four revenue sources from the Form 990, and those are membership dues, contributions from fundraisers, non-cash contributions, and other contributions. Volunteers were measured by the number of volunteers reported on the form. The authors analyzed these mission statements and measured use of emotion using LIWC, created as a tool to assess mental states and psychological characteristics, and generates lists of words that match topics such as positive emotion or negative emotion. Examples of positive words could include comfort, dignity, and well-being, while examples of negative words could be hopeless, poor, and victim. LIWC generates a score using these words that is the percentage of positive or negative emotional words over the total number of words in the statement. In the graphic provided, there are examples of how this works and how the scores are produced. Now, we will see the results that the authors found from their research. This research found that emotion did in fact affect donations and volunteers. A direct quote from the journal article reads, "We find that positive mission statements are often associated with more volunteers and higher donations, but this pattern varies depending on the institutional field of the nonprofit, with field stress and community and social bonding being particularly responsive to positive sentiment. Negative sentiment alone is rarely an effective strategy for nonprofits to gain volunteers or donors. For some nonprofit categories, however, the combined use of positive and negative emotions is associated with higher levels of donations and numbers of volunteers. This tells us that emotion, and the type of emotion used, affects nonprofits in some way, though some nonprofit sectors are affected more than others. Here we get a good look at some of the data. Most nonprofits overwhelmingly use positive emotion in their mission statements to evoke action from potential donors and volunteers. However, as can be seen in crime and legal related and housing and shelter, negative emotion was more commonly used there. Education, youth development, and arts, culture, and the humanities were the fields that most relied on positive emotive language. But how did all these words actually affect the numbers? The data showed that a 10% increase in positive emotion words resulted in 0.5% increase in donations, and that a 10% increase in negative emotion words resulted in a 0.2% increase in donations. The research was especially telling in the difference between mission statements with no emotion and mission statements with emotion. Compared to mission statements with no emotion, nonprofits that used any positive words had 13% more in donations. Donations saw a 22% increase when a nonprofit's mission statement contained a negative emotion word, and the most successful way to appeal to donors was through a mix of both positive and negative emotion words, which saw a 29% increase in donations. Fundraisers argue that the winning formula for nonprofits is as follows: define a social problem, negative; demonstrate harm, again negative; identify an opportunity for amelioration, positive; promise to effect change through their programs, positive; and suggest the power of the donor by participating, positive. However, a different story is told when looking at the data for volunteers. While donations increased when any type of emotion was shown, volunteers only saw a measurable increase when using either positive language, which increased volunteers by 31%, or positive combined with negative language, which increased volunteers by 38%. Negative emotion alone did not drive an increase in volunteering. And now we have a chance to discuss the data and delve into what it tells us. Emotive language drives people to give in different ways. Lewis, Haviland, and Barrett wrote of positive emotions like pride and love being catalysts for people wanting to engage and share with others. Kendrick and Lundberg described negative mood priming, like making people sad, as a way for people to mediate the feeling by engaging in self-therapy. In other words, when potential donors or volunteers encounter challenges, like feeding the hungry, presented to them in emotionally negative ways, they should be motivated to alleviate the discomfort they feel from this information by donating or volunteering. However, as was found in the research, negative emotion alone is less persuading for volunteers. We can conclude this may be so due to the simplicity of donating versus volunteering. Donating can be done through a phone, a computer screen, or in other non-personal ways. Volunteering, however, is typically done in person. When presenting your cause using solely negative emotion, while people may be comfortable giving from a distance, they likely will not feel as comfortable placing themselves directly in that situation. The data and its results provide information for nonprofits within different fields on how they should communicate. While positive emotion is used more often in the nonprofit sector in general, there are specific fields that may benefit from using solely positive emotion or from mixing in negative emotive language. There are some potential flaws to the research, and the main one I deduced was that, as in life, people don't always do as they say. This research examined the emotion within mission statements. However, those mission statements may not always line up directly with how the nonprofits are actually marketing to potential donors and volunteers. Overall, this journal article and its research takes a good first look at how emotion can affect participation within nonprofits and helps to explain why emotion drives people to act. The journal clearly showed how emotive language within nonprofit mission statements affects donor giving and volunteering efforts, which is valuable information, quite literally, for nonprofits to use as they continue their efforts to bring in resources. Thank you.